hello once again. At this point, you have gained the skills of inner sight and inner hearing. You are now ready to begin exploring your inner world in a deeper, more intimate way. We will now move on from simple objects and sounds to imagining landscapes and structures. People have many names for inner places such as these. Some call them mindscapes. Others prefer to call them memory palaces or dream worlds. However, the most common term used in the Tulpamancy community is Wonderland. Wonderlands are truly amazing things. They can be small and simple, or vast and intricately detailed. From the size of a small room to the expanse of a solar system with multiple worlds, Wonderlands can be any space that can be imagined, real or otherwise. A Wonderland can be a cozy cottage tucked away into the bosom of a sprawling mountain range, or it can be an alien landscape with ancient fungi that tower high as evergreen trees. A Wonderland can be a penthouse apartment, situated on top of a skyline of a bustling city, or it can be in the ruins of an ancient temple on a floating island in the clouds. Anything can be a Wonderland, and you will soon start exploring your own. But it is important to note that Wonderlands are a very subjective thing, and Tulpamancers are quite varied in the way they create their own Wonderland. There is no right or wrong way to create one. However, I will go over a few trends in how Tulpamancers end up using them. I have found that most Tulpamancers eventually find a specific Wonderland that they prefer to inhabit long-term. They usually have some sort of dwelling in an environment they find comfortable or interesting. This place becomes special in that it is a sort of center for the activities that happen within their inner space, and many Tulpamancers attribute a great personal meaning to their Wonderlands. It becomes like a home for them and their tulpas. For these Tulpamancers, it is important for the Wonderland to be persistent and remain recognizable in the very same way every time they visit. In this way, their Wonderland becomes sort of a peaceful, special area that they can relax in no matter where their physical body is. However, this is not always how Wonderlands are used. Other Tulpamancers have no fixed location that their Wonderland centers around, and prefer to change the scenery quite frequently. For these Tulpamancers, the Wonderland serves as merely a backdrop for the experiences that they have with their Tulpa. For them, it is more important to have an open-ended Wonderland that is ripe for exploration, rather than having a single persistent location. They might have an established base that they venture back to frequently, or they might not. The important thing is that their Wonderland has an emphasis on freedom and adventure. Yet you might be thinking to yourself, why would I need a Wonderland at all? How does this help me develop a Tulpa? The honest truth is that you don't explicitly need one. I'm not going to lie and say that isn't the case. Yet I believe that having a Wonderland helps with the development of a Tulpa to such a degree that it should be learned by default, and I'm going to explain my reasons why. First off, it's a common misconception that you can merely just use your physical surroundings as a place your Tulpa will inhabit from the get-go. Many assume that they can simply overlay their Tulpa on their bedroom, living room, or wherever they are. This is possible, yet it's anything but simple. Unless you are sufficiently advanced with your visualization and auralization, you can't just jump into full imposition. It is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to just skip ahead to seeing your Tulpa as a vivid hallucination. This means seeing them as realistically as possible that they are indistinguishable from your own physical senses of sight and sound. So therefore, you must take a different approach if you want to avoid using a Wonderland. You must use your internal senses to see them in an internal copy of your physical environment. Essentially, you're creating a mental copy of your domicile and then putting your Tulpa in it. At this point, it's really not much different than just creating a Wonderland. You're just making a Wonderland of your surroundings, one that you will be tempted to interact with physically, or check on to make sure you're copying everything correctly, thus distracting you from your internal senses. Secondly, it's important to consider how the Tulpa will feel in the physical copy of the world that you put them in. A Tulpa will not be able to physically interact with the world your physical body inhabits. It's a simple fact. So if they want to sit on a couch, it won't depress realistically under their weight. If they try to pick something up, the object will not physically move. If they want to go to another room, they won't be able to turn the doorknob on their own. It's very limiting for the Tulpa to be an incorporeal entity in a physical environment. Some Tulpas are alright with this, but many would prefer to be in a field with their host on a level playing field. In a Wonderland, the Tulpa can interact with the environment just like the host can. Third, the Wonderland gives the Tulpa somewhere to be when their host is busy. As much as I hate to admit it, there are many times during a Tulpamancer's life where it is not possible to give attention to a Tulpa. Work, school, and social engagements are all time when the host will have to leave the Tulpa to their own devices. During times like these, a Tulpa can choose to exist in the Wonderland instead of going dormant, sleeping, or existing in a black void of nothingness. This gives them a sense of personhood, in that they can simply be a person existing in a place on their own when the host isn't watching. The Wonderland provides this, and it encourages sentience and separateness with your Tulpa. Fourth, a Wonderland will eventually become a place for the Tulpa and Tulpamancer to share together as their own special place. At the start, the amount of influence over the Wonderland will be very one-sided. The host will make all the decisions about the Wonderland, what it looks like and what happens in it. Yet as a Tulpa develops, they will begin to change the Wonderland on their own, contributing to it in their own way. They will make small changes here and there, then bigger and bigger ones, even going as far as to create their own vast areas for themselves. In this way, a Wonderland transforms into a sort of collaborative project with the Tulpa and the host having just as much ownership. It becomes a sort of home that is shared together, and a great deal of meaning can be derived from this. So if none of those reasons strike a chord with you, then you may want to re-examine why you're creating a Tulpa, or perhaps consider using a different guide. I won't take it personally, I only wish for you to get the kind of help you're looking for. However, this guide heavily uses Wonderlands, so you might be better off with something else. Now, let's discuss what actually goes into creating a Wonderland. For this section, we will not focus on creating a large, expansive Wonderland right off the bat. That is too much at once, so we will start off with working on things at a smaller scope. Instead, we will discuss what I call Wonderland scenes. Think of it like the set for a television show or a movie. To create a set, a crew constructs buildings, props, and backdrops and puts them all together to make a convincing place that looks like it's part of a much bigger world. However, they really only create stuff that's needed to make it work for what they're filming. When creating a family sitcom, they don't create an entire neighborhood with fully furnished houses. They make a bunch of different sets of the interiors of the homes, and then film the outsides of the houses separately in a different area. What we will do here will be like creating one of those interior sets. Wonderland scenes are part of a landscape or a simple room that are intended to just be a nice simple area to sit and take in the ambience. For now we will focus on viewing them from a stationary perspective, as walking around can be somewhat challenging. You are free to look around, and it does not matter if you wish to view things from a first-person perspective or a third-person perspective. Both ways work just as well, and so it comes down to a matter of preference. Also, you shouldn't worry about making them persistent, complicated, or interactive. They are merely for practice for creating an immersive environment. You probably won't need to come back unless you find one you particularly like. If you do find one you enjoy, keep it in mind for the next section where we will discuss how to chain together Wonderland scenes to create a fully fleshed out Wonderland. As is usual by this point, you will begin creating your Wonderland scenes by getting into a meditative state and clearing your mind. You will then start to form in the environment little by imagining it with your internal senses. There are many ways to approach this, and I will go over a few general methods. One way to start is by simply imagining the things around you first, and then moving on to things further in the distance. For instance, a forest Wonderland scene you could start by imagining a patch of grass around you, then slowly expanding it. As it expands, it will bring in the trunks of some trees, some shrubs or flowers, then further to show the forest canopy, distant hills with rocky outcroppings, and eventually the sky, the sun, and the clouds. Then the sounds of the forest can come in. The chirping of birds, the rush of the wind through the leaves. Then finally you are left with a fully imagined scene. Another approach is to start with a blurry idea of the scene, and then bring it into greater and greater clarity. Let's consider the forest Wonderland scene for this one. At the start, we form a general idea of the landscape and the sky. The sky is a mass of blue, and the ground is a sort of blurry green shape that forms the outline of the horizon. Then we paint a few white cloud-like shapes in the sky, and a bright yellow ball for the sun. We start forming the ground with patches of gray for rocks and brown for exposed earth. Darker green blobs become bushes and plants, while long thin strips of brown become tree trunks. We paint over the sky with a canopy of bright green leaves. Then slowly we keep divining the shapes and the details of everything, bringing into clarity the trees, the leaves, the grass, the bushes, the stones, the flowers, and the songbirds. At some point in this whole process, the sounds of the forest are introduced, bringing further life into the increasing detail. At last, the scene is finished when a sufficient level of detail is formed. Sometimes it is helpful to start with an internal sense that isn't visualization. For example, you could start by auralizing the scene before you have any visual elements in it. Let's use the forest Wonderland scene again. Before we visualize anything, let's start by first auralizing the sounds of the landscape. We start by listening to some bird calls, the wind shifting clumps of leaves, and perhaps some twigs or leaves falling on the forest floor. We focus on those and slowly visualize what's making the sounds we're auralizing. We bring the leaves on the trees into clarity, fading them in from darkness. We bring in the birds and the branches they're sitting on. From there we expand the scene to bring the rest together, keeping some focus on the soundscape as we progress. If you feel like it, you can also try this with your internal sense of touch. You can start with a feeling of the grass between your toes, or the wind brushing against your neck. You can then move on to auditory or visual senses as you feel comfortable. To summarize, you can start with a non-visual sense, and then slowly bring visuals into the picture once you finally feel that you're being drawn into the scene. As always, please keep in mind that these techniques are subjective, and they might not work for everyone. Try experimenting with your own way to approach things. It doesn't even need to be a gradual build-up of the scene. If you believe that just jumping into a scene will work, then be bold and give it a try. You now have what you need to start on some exercises. The goal for this section is to create a Wonderland scene and spend 10 minutes inside of it. For the 10 minutes, you should be able to keep the scene consistent without getting distracted. The exercises are all different suggestions for Wonderland scenes to try out. The intention is to read the description of the exercises to get an idea of the scene, and then try to create a Wonderland scene that matches it. It doesn't have to be precise, and you can change aspects if you feel you want to. You can also experiment by finding your own scenes to create if you feel particularly inspired. Try looking up images on the internet for places you'd like to be in. For these exercises, quiet, comfortable scenes will work better than ones that are very active and busy. Try to find a scene that you feel relaxes you. If you feel stuck, you can always try visualizing some more, or auralizing before you jump into a scene. Or try using a different method I described earlier in this section. If you keep getting errant thoughts or distracting visuals, one thing you can always do is simply let go of a scene and return to a meditative state. Don't worry too much about making everything completely true to life. It is sometimes better to simply clear your mind and start fresh than it is to fix everything you feel is going wrong. You can also try using headphones to listen to a soundscape that matches the scene to help draw you in. Remember, the true measure of your success is if you feel transported to another location, not if your inner senses are totally accurate to a realistic scene. With that said, give it a try and try to find a place inside yourself that you enjoy. Exercise 1. The Mountain Stream. You are in the foothills of a mountain range near a small stream. A mountain stream flows down the hillside, snaking along a rock-covered bank. The water is crystal clear, and it glides effortlessly over the smooth, brown stones. The stream is babbling gently as it splashes down a small rock formation. You are seated on a gentle slope of the hill, the grass around you is wild, rough, and covered in pine needles. The trunks of large pine trees are all around you, and their dense green canopy covers up the sun. The white-tipped caps of mountains peek out from behind the pine trees, and the sky is a bright, clear blue. You can hear the needles rustle softly as a thin breeze runs up the mountainside. Exercise 2. Beach at sunset. You are on a beach at the edge of a tropical resort town. Close enough to the water, but not too close. You can easily hear the rhythm of waves rolling in and out on the sand. The sun is dipped just below the horizon, and the sky is a bright cascade of colors spreading upwards from neon orange to powdery pink, and then to deep purple. A few white plastic sun chairs share the beach with you, but nothing else. Behind you, the beach comes to a line of palm trees and a short strip of grass. Back in the distance, the lights of the small town are glimmering, and above them, the stars have started to come out. Exercise 3. The Old Farmhouse. You are in a vast field of golden wheat near a farmhouse. The sky is overcast, and it is late afternoon, covering everything in a sepia tone. Out in the horizon, a distant tree line borders the property, with leaves of yellow and brown. Inside the property is an ever-shifting sea of wheatgrass that undulates like ocean waves in the wind. There is a well-worn gravel driveway that leads up to a neat square yard. A large white farmhouse sits in the center, its paint chipping and flaking from age. A massive oak is near it, its leaves all but gone, saved for a few tanned patches. A tire swing hangs from it on a rope. You can hear the faint creaking of the house shutters, and the settling of old wood. The wind is pushing at your back. Exercise 4. Road trip through the desert. You are in the passenger seat of a car traveling along a stretch of road in the desert. The sky is clear, and the sun is high in the sky. The road is old and sun-beaten. It is a strip of gray asphalt that spans out to the horizon, ending in a blurry heat mirage. The desert is featureless, save for a few lone cacti and scrubby desert bushes. The sun is bright and hot on the sand, but inside the car it is cool and shady. The faint yellow lines of the road stream towards you and disappear under the hood of the car in a rhythmic pattern. You hear the hum of the tires on the road and feel a gentle vibration through the car seat.